The weight of innovation. The M249 saw lay disassembled across Eugene Stoner's cluttered workbench, its components gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of Armalite's California facility. Winter rain drummed against the windows as Stoner's weathered hands moved over the receiver, his eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. He was just a machinist's son from Indiana, until the morning reports from Vietnam forced him to confront a terrible truth. American soldiers were dying because their squad automatic weapons couldn't keep pace with modern warfare. The clock on the workshop wall read 3:17 a.m., but sleep had become a stranger to Eugene Morrison Stoner in these final months of 1976. Around him, the California rain created a steady percussion against the windows of the Armalite facility, each drop echoing the weight that pressed against his chest. The after-action reports from Vietnam lay scattered across his desk like fallen leaves, each one a testament to firepower gaps that had cost American lives. "Sir, we need you to look at this again," his assistant had said earlier that evening, sliding another manila folder across the desk. "The Army's getting serious about that squad automatic weapon requirement." Stoner had nodded without looking up from the bolt assembly he was examining. At 54, his hands still moved with the precision learned in his father's machine shop during the Depression, when every tolerance mattered and waste meant hunger. But now those hands carried a different weight, the knowledge that his earlier creation, the M16 rifle, had saved countless American lives, while early production problems had also cost precious souls when rifles jammed in the crucial moments of combat. The Pentagon investigators had cleared him of responsibility years ago, proving that manufacturing shortcuts and powder changes, not his design, had caused the failures. Still, the ghosts of those soldiers haunted his California workshop. Every weapon he conceived carried the echoes of men who had died holding tools he had imagined. The year 1976 found America wrestling with the echoes of Vietnam that still reverberated through Pentagon corridors. Infantry squads had learned brutal lessons about firepower gaps, those deadly seconds when M16s fell silent during magazine changes, leaving soldiers vulnerable to enemy assault. The Army's aging M60 machine gun was proving too heavy for rapid deployment, too complex for field maintenance under combat conditions, and too slow for the fluid warfare that defined modern conflict. Squad leaders desperate after-action reports described moments when superior enemy automatic weapons pinned down entire American units, turning tactical advances into bloody retreats. The reports painted a clear picture. American squads were outgunned by enemies equipped with lighter, more reliable automatic weapons that could provide sustained suppressive fire without the logistics burden of traditional machine guns. Eugene Morrison Stoner understood machinery the way other men understood music or mathematics. His childhood in Indiana's shadow during the Great Depression had taught him that survival demanded innovation, that conventional thinking was a luxury poor boys couldn't afford. While other children played, young Eugene absorbed the rhythm of precision manufacturing in machine shops and garages, learning that every tolerance mattered when lives hung in the balance. His father had lost work when factories closed, and skilled machinists became obsolete overnight. The family's poverty had been Eugene's first teacher, showing him to see solutions where others saw impossibilities, to find elegance in mechanical simplicity when others pursued complexity. Those lessons now guided his approach to the Army's 1976 squad automatic weapon requirement. But the defense establishment viewed his proposal with deep skepticism. When conventional wisdom pointed towards scaled-down machine guns or modified rifles, Stoner proposed something different, a lightweight, magazine-fed automatic rifle that challenged existing doctrine rather than fitting neatly within it. Defense contractors proposed heavy, complex systems that promised devastating firepower but demanded extensive training and maintenance. Pentagon planners wanted proven technology, time-tested mechanisms that soldiers already understood. "They think I've lost my touch," Stoner murmured to the empty workshop, running his fingers along the gas tube assembly. The first twist had come during early trials when his prototype suffered catastrophic failures, its bolt mechanism seizing under sustained fire. Critics whispered that the aging designer's obsession with lightweight construction compromised reliability. Military officers who had blamed him for early M16 problems saw vindication in the smoking wreckage of his failed test weapon. For 3 months, Stoner had redesigned the entire operating system, working 18-hour days while competitors gained ground. The California facility became his second home, its fluorescent lights burning through countless midnight hours as he pursued the elegant solution that danced just beyond his reach. The second twist had emerged from an unexpected source, battlefield intelligence from the Middle East. Israeli forces reported that Soviet-supplied RPK light machine guns were revolutionizing squad tactics, giving small enemy units devastating suppressive capability without the logistics burden of traditional machine guns. American military planners suddenly realized they faced a doctrinal crisis. Enemy squads were outgunning American units equipped with conventional weapons. Overnight, Stoner's lightweight concept seemed less experimental and more essential. The same officers who had dismissed his proposal began asking urgent questions about development timelines and production capabilities. If stories like this make you question what you do in someone else's boots, tell us in the comments how you imagine you'd react in this camp, and stay with us for the next chapters. The rain against the Armalite windows seemed to echo the distant sound of automatic weapons fire that Stoner had never heard but somehow understood. In his mind, he could see American soldiers crouched behind cover, waiting for their M16s to reload while enemy fire kept them pinned down. Those phantom soldiers depended on him to create something better, something that might bring them home alive. The deepest resistance came from within the Army's own ranks. Career officers had built reputations around existing weapon systems and training doctrines. They argued that soldiers needed fewer weapons, not more, that existing rifles provided adequate firepower when properly employed, that introducing another caliber would strain already complex supply lines. Some questioned whether squad-level automatic weapons would encourage wasteful ammunition expenditure, turning disciplined riflemen into undisciplined spray-and-pray shooters. Colonel James Mitchell embodied this institutional resistance. A veteran of 2 tours in Vietnam, he commanded respect in Pentagon planning rooms, where weapon procurement decisions shaped the future of American infantry doctrine. In his Arlington office, maps of Southeast Asia still covered one wall, a reminder of battles fought with the weapons already in the Army's inventory. "Stoner's chasing ghosts," Mitchell told his aide during a December 1976 briefing. "We've got perfectly good weapons. What we need is better training, not more hardware to maintain in the field." But Mitchell's certainty was already cracking around the edges. The after-action reports crossing his desk painted a different picture than the one he preferred to see. Squad leaders wrote with increasing urgency about firepower disadvantages that training alone couldn't overcome. Enemy automatic weapons were changing the rules of engagement faster than American doctrine could adapt. Back in California, Stoner worked through his breakthrough methodically, obsessively focused on a single component, the gas system that cycled the weapon's action. Where other designers pursued complex mechanisms with multiple moving parts, he designed an elegantly simple system that could function reliably under extreme conditions while maintaining the lightweight that made rapid deployment possible. The gas regulator seemed like a minor detail to outside observers, but Stoner understood its revolutionary potential. This small adjustment mechanism would allow soldiers to adapt the weapon's cycling rate based on environmental conditions, a feature that would prove invaluable in desert sand, jungle humidity, and Arctic cold. The Army's global commitments demanded weapons that could function anywhere American soldiers might serve. Eugene's wife, Jean, often found him at the kitchen table in their Palo Alto home, sketching mechanical diagrams on napkins while his coffee grew cold. She had learned to recognize the distant look in his eyes when a design problem consumed his attention, the same expression he'd worn during the M16's development years earlier. "You're carrying too much weight, Eugene," she told him one morning, watching him push scrambled eggs around his plate while staring at a bolt assembly drawing. "Those boys who died in Vietnam, that wasn't your fault." "Tell that to their mothers," he replied quietly, not looking up from his sketches. Jean Stoner understood her husband's burden better than most military wives. She had watched him transform from an enthusiastic young designer into a man haunted by the unintended consequences of his innovations. The M16 rifle had indeed saved countless American lives, but the early production problems that caused combat failures had left scars on Eugene's soul that no Pentagon investigation could heal. In his workshop, Stoner continued refining his design with the patience of a craftsman who understood that lives depended on precision. Each component was tested, retested, and tested again under conditions that simulated the harsh realities of combat. He built reliability into every tolerance, knowing that a jammed weapon in combat meant a dead soldier. The prototype taking shape on his workbench represented more than mechanical innovation. It embodied a philosophy of warfare that prioritized the individual soldier's survival over institutional preferences for familiar systems. Stoner believed that superior weapons could protect American soldiers and potentially shorten conflicts by providing decisive tactical advantages. But even as he pursued technical perfection, nagging doubts crept into his thoughts during the long California nights. Was he creating tools of protection or instruments of perpetual warfare? Would better weapons save lives or enable military interventions that might otherwise prove impossible? These philosophical questions had no clear answers, but the immediate tactical problem demanded solution. American squads needed reliable automatic weapons that could match or exceed enemy capabilities. Everything else was luxury that soldiers in combat couldn't afford. The winter rain continued against the Armalite windows as 1976 drew to a close, but inside the facility, spring was beginning to emerge in the form of a weapon that would transform modern infantry tactics. Stoner's elegant solution was taking physical form, a lightweight automatic rifle that challenged conventional wisdom while promising to revolutionize squad-level firepower. Yet success would bring its own moral complexity. Each breakthrough brought Stoner closer to creating a weapon that would echo across decades of conflict, carried into battles he had never envisioned by soldiers facing enemies in wars that seemed to stretch endlessly into an uncertain future. The machinist's son from Indiana was changing warfare itself, proving that individual innovation could reshape global military doctrine. But with that power came responsibility that weighed heavier than any mechanism he had ever designed. Letters from home arrived at military installations worldwide with the weight of worry and expectation. In the winter of 1977, families across America wrote to sons and husbands serving in an increasingly complex world where the lessons of Vietnam were still being absorbed. The mothers and wives who penned these letters understood that their loved ones carried weapons designed by men like Eugene Stoner, tools that might determine who came home and who didn't. Martha Rodriguez sealed another letter to her son Miguel, stationed with the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. Her kitchen table in San Antonio was covered with newspaper clippings about military developments, budget hearings, and defense contracts. She didn't understand the technical details, but she grasped the essential truth. Better weapons meant better chances of survival. "Mijo," she wrote in her careful script, "I read in the paper they're testing new equipment at your base. I pray every night that God gives our soldiers the best tools to stay safe and come home. At Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez received his mother's letter during a break in live fire exercises that were testing prototypes of Stoner's revolutionary design. The irony wasn't lost on him. His mother's prayers were being answered by a man she'd never meet, working in a California facility she'd never see, solving problems she couldn't imagine. The weapon Rodriguez and his fellow paratroopers were evaluating represented something unprecedented, a squad automatic weapon that one soldier could carry and deploy without the support crew required by traditional machine guns. During urban warfare simulations, squads equipped with Stoner's creation could establish fire superiority against larger enemy forces, fundamentally changing small unit tactics. But institutional resistance persisted within Army leadership. Colonel Mitchell found himself defending procurement policies that increasingly seemed obsolete. The battlefield intelligence from the Middle East continued to paint a troubling picture. Soviet-supplied automatic weapons were giving enemy units tactical advantages that American forces struggled to counter with conventional rifles and crew-served weapons. "Sir, we're being outgunned by smaller units," his aide reported during a January 1977 briefing. "The Israelis are requesting technical specifications for Stoner's prototype. They want to compare it against the RPK systems they're facing." Mitchell studied the intelligence reports with growing unease. His resistance to new weapon systems had been built on decades of experience with soldiers who preferred familiar equipment to exotic innovations. But the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Warfare was evolving faster than military doctrine could adapt. In California, Stoner pushed through the final design challenges with 18-hour workdays that worried Gene and impressed his engineering team. The breakthrough came when he achieved the perfect balance between weight, reliability, and firepower, a combination that had eluded previous attempts to create effective squad automatic weapons. The M249's quick-change barrel system allowed sustained fire without overheating, something impossible with conventional rifles. This seemingly simple innovation would prove crucial in extended firefights, where suppressive fire could mean the difference between successful maneuver and tactical disaster. But even as technical triumph approached, Stoner wrestled with philosophical questions that had no easy answers. His correspondence with Jean revealed a man divided between pride in his achievement and concern about its implications. "I solved the firepower problem," he wrote to his wife during a business trip to Washington. "But solving problems in warfare sometimes creates new problems. Better weapons might make conflicts more likely, not less." Gene's response arrived a week later, forwarded to his hotel in Arlington. "Eugene, you can't control how politicians use the tools you create. You can only make sure our soldiers have the best equipment possible when they're sent into harm's way. The moral responsibility belongs to the men who make war, not the ones who try to protect our boys." Her words provided some comfort, but couldn't completely ease the weight of responsibility that grew heavier with each successful test. Stoner understood that he was creating something that would outlive him, shape conflicts he couldn't foresee, and echo through decades of military history. The final trials at Fort Bragg in early 1982 validated every aspect of his design philosophy. Skeptical paratroopers who had resisted change found themselves converted by the weapon's performance. The M249 democratized automatic weapons capability, giving every infantry squad the suppressive fire previously available only to specialized machine gun teams. Military theorists watched as traditional squad formations evolved around the new weapon. The saw gunner became the cornerstone of fire and maneuver tactics, fundamentally altering how small units approached combat missions. The weapon's reliability would later be proven in Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, validating Stoner's vision while revealing tactical applications he had never imagined. Do you think you'd cling to what you were taught back home, or to what your own eyes see in a place like this? Comment which side you'd lean toward, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. Yet success carried its own moral burden. As the M249 moved toward full production, Stoner found himself watching young soldiers carry his creation into battles he had never envisioned, facing enemies in conflicts that seemed to stretch endlessly across decades. The weapon would become the soundtrack of modern warfare, its distinctive cyclic rate echoing through Afghan valleys and Iraqi cities. The testing grounds at Fort Bragg in 1982 bore witness to something that would quietly reshape American military doctrine. Paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne moved through urban warfare simulations, with prototypes of Stoner's creations slung across their shoulders, their movements adapting to possibilities that previous weapons had never offered. Staff Sergeant David Chen had served 2 tours with conventional equipment before being selected for the prototype evaluation. A careful soldier who preferred proven systems to experimental gear, he approached Stoner's creation with the healthy skepticism that kept infantry veterans alive. But as the exercises progressed, his resistance gave way to grudging respect. "Sir, this changes everything," he reported to his company commander after a particularly challenging urban assault exercise. "One guy with this weapon can do what used to take a 3-man crew. We're not just carrying more firepower, we're carrying more tactical options." The psychological impact proved as significant as the tactical advantages. Squad leaders discovered that the mere presence of reliable automatic weapons changed how their units approached mission planning. Suppressive fire that had once required careful coordination with supporting weapons crews could now be provided by individual squad members, dramatically increasing unit flexibility and response times. But institutional transformation moved slowly through the Army's hierarchical structure. Colonel Mitchell found himself attending briefings where younger officers presented data that challenged everything he had believed about infantry weapons. The evidence was overwhelming. Squads equipped with the M249 consistently outperformed units armed with conventional weapons during realistic combat exercises. In California, Stoner monitored the Fort Bragg trials with mixture of pride and apprehension. Each successful test validated his design philosophy, but also moved his creation closer to widespread deployment in conflicts he couldn't predict or control. The weapon that had begun as a solution to specific tactical problems was becoming something larger, a tool that would enable military interventions across the globe. Dr. Sarah Hoffman, a military analyst studying small unit tactics, observed the Fort Bragg exercises with academic interest that gradually transformed into profound concern. Her preliminary reports noted improvements in tactical effectiveness, but also highlighted troubling implications for military doctrine. "We're democratizing violence," she wrote in a confidential assessment. "When squad-level units can provide their own suppressive fire, the threshold for military engagement decreases. Operations that might have been impossible with conventional weapons become routine with superior firepower." Her analysis reached Pentagon planners, who were already wrestling with the strategic implications of Stoner's innovation. The M249 didn't just solve tactical problems. It potentially changed the calculus of when and where American forces might be deployed. Better weapons could enable military actions that had previously been deemed too risky or resource-intensive. Meanwhile, Sergeant Rodriguez wrote to his mother in San Antonio with news that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. His squad was being equipped with weapons that fundamentally altered their combat capabilities. The letter carried excitement tinged with uncertainty about what this technological edge might mean for future deployments. "Mama, the new equipment is incredible, but it makes me think we'll be sent places we never would have gone before." When you can do more with fewer people, the temptation to use that advantage grows stronger. His mother's response arrived 2 weeks later, carried the wisdom of a generation that had watched technology transform warfare throughout the 20th century. "Mijo, better weapons might save your life, but they won't bring peace any faster." Pray that the men making decisions remember that every war ends with someone coming home to their family. In his Arlington office, Colonel Mitchell finally acknowledged what the evidence had been telling him for months. His aide found him studying performance data from Fort Bragg, with the expression of a man whose fundamental assumptions were being quietly dismantled. "Schedule a meeting with the procurement committee," Mitchell said quietly. "It's time to stop fighting this and start figuring out how to implement it properly." The decision represented more than tactical adaptation. It marked the institutional acceptance of a new paradigm in infantry warfare. The Army was embracing weapons that would enable small units to accomplish missions that had previously required larger formations with greater logistical support. Stoner learned of the Army's decision during a phone call from his project liaison at the Pentagon. The news brought satisfaction, mixed with foreboding. His innovation was succeeding beyond his original expectations, but success in weapons design carried moral weight that civilian achievements never bore. That evening, he walked the California hills behind his Palo Alto home, watching sunset paint the sky, while contemplating the legacy he was creating. The M249 would save American lives by providing tactical advantages that enemies couldn't match. But it would also enable military interventions that might not have been attempted with conventional weapons. The machinist's son from Indiana had solved the technical problem that military leaders had posed. But solving problems in warfare often revealed new complexities that no amount of engineering brilliance could resolve. The central secret that emerged from 5 years of development wasn't hidden in classified documents or technical specifications. It was embedded in the fundamental transformation of American military doctrine that Stoner's creation had quietly enabled. By 1983, Pentagon planners were conducting studies that revealed the strategic implications of widespread M249 deployment, implications that extended far beyond the tactical improvements the weapon provided. General Robert Hayes, architect of light infantry doctrine, discovered the truth while reviewing deployment scenarios for rapid intervention forces. His classified assessment contained a revelation that would reshape how America projected military power. Small units equipped with squad automatic weapons could accomplish missions that had previously required battalion-sized formations. "We're not just upgrading firepower," he confided to a select group of senior officers. "We're fundamentally altering the threshold for military intervention. Operations that were politically and logistically impossible with conventional weapons become routine when squad-level units can provide their own suppressive fire." The implications were staggering. Humanitarian interventions, peacekeeping missions, and limited military actions that had once required massive logistical support could now be conducted by smaller forces with reduced political risk. The M249 wasn't just a weapon, it was an enabler of American military reach that would echo through decades of conflict. In California, Stoner learned of these strategic assessments through briefings that left him profoundly unsettled. His solution to a tactical problem had created strategic possibilities that no one had anticipated during the original development process. The weight of this revelation settled over him like fog rolling in from San Francisco Bay. "Jean, I think I've created something bigger than I intended," he told his wife during a walk through their Palo Alto neighborhood. "The weapon works exactly as designed, but its success is changing how our military thinks about using force." Jean studied her husband's troubled expression with the insight of a woman who had watched him wrestle with the unintended consequences of innovation throughout their marriage. "You can't uninvent what you've created, Eugene. You can only hope that the people using it remember that every shot fired affects someone's family." The first major test of the M249's strategic impact came during Operation Urgent Fury in Grenada, where squad automatic weapons enabled small units to accomplish objectives that would have required larger forces with conventional equipment. The tactical success validated Stoner's design philosophy while confirming the strategic analyst's predictions about reduced intervention thresholds. Sergeant Rodriguez, now serving with the 82nd Airborne in the Caribbean, wrote to his mother about the weapon's performance during actual combat operations. "Mama, the equipment worked perfectly, but watching how easily we could control situations made me understand why some people worry about making war too easy for politicians to choose." His letter reached San Antonio while Martha Rodriguez was reading newspaper accounts of the Grenada operation that praised American technological superiority without acknowledging the strategic implications of that advantage. She understood instinctively what many commentators missed. Better weapons didn't necessarily lead to shorter wars or fewer casualties. They might simply enable more conflicts. Dr. Hoffman's post-operation analysis provided the academic framework for concerns that many military professionals were beginning to share. The M249's tactical excellence has created strategic temptation. When intervention becomes operationally easier, the political calculus for military action shifts accordingly. Her classified report reached Pentagon planners who were already grappling with requests from regional commanders who saw new possibilities in their updated equipment inventories. The weapon that had been designed to protect American soldiers was enabling their deployment to situations that might not have warranted military intervention under previous tactical limitations. Colonel Mitchell, now converted to supporter of the new weapon system, found himself in the uncomfortable position of advocating for equipment that he increasingly understood carried strategic implications beyond pure military effectiveness. His experience embodied the institutional transformation occurring throughout the Army's leadership structure. "We asked for better weapons and got them," he reflected during a staff meeting in late 1983. "Now we need to figure out how to use this advantage responsibly, because tactical superiority creates strategic obligations." In his workshop, Stoner continued refining manufacturing processes that would enable mass production of the M249, but the technical challenges now seemed secondary to the moral complexities that his success had created. Each improvement in reliability or reduction in production costs brought his creation closer to widespread deployment in conflicts he couldn't foresee or control. The symbolic weight of his achievement became clear during a ceremony honoring the M249's adoption as standard infantry equipment. Standing before assembled military leaders and defense contractors, Stoner realized that his name would be forever linked to a weapon that had fundamentally altered America's military capabilities and strategic options. The machinist's son from Indiana had solved the firepower problem that had cost American lives in Vietnam. But in solving that problem, he had created new possibilities for American military intervention that would echo through conflicts in Somalia, the Balkans, Iraq, and Afghanistan, places that hadn't even been considerations during the weapon's original development. The weight of legacy settled over Eugene Stoner during the final decades of his life, as he watched young soldiers carry his creation into battles he had never envisioned, facing enemies in conflicts that seemed to stretch endlessly across an uncertain world. The M249 became the soundtrack of modern warfare, its distinctive cyclic rate echoing through Afghan valleys, Iraqi cities, and peacekeeping missions across the globe. By 1991, the weapon's strategic impact became undeniable during Operation Desert Storm, where squad automatic weapons enabled rapid advancement by units that could suppress enemy positions without waiting for supporting fire from crew-served weapons. The tactical advantages that Stoner had designed into his creation were reshaping how America fought wars, but also how easily those wars could be initiated. General Hayes, now retired, reflected on the transformation during a military history conference at West Point. "We asked Eugene Stoner to solve a tactical problem, and he gave us a strategic revolution, Small units with M249s can accomplish missions that once required battalions. That capability has fundamentally altered the calculus of military intervention. The irony wasn't lost on military historians studying the period. Stoner had created a weapon to protect American soldiers, but its effectiveness had enabled their deployment to situations that might never have warranted military action under previous tactical limitations. The tool designed to save lives had become an instrument that made new conflicts operationally feasible. In Somalia, Sergeant Rodriguez, now a grizzled veteran of multiple deployments, found himself carrying Stoner's creation through the streets of Mogadishu during operations that exemplified the strategic transformation the weapon had enabled. His letters home captured the moral complexity that many soldiers experienced. "Mama, the equipment still works perfectly, but sometimes I wonder if having better weapons makes us too confident about using them. We can do things now that would have been impossible 10 years ago, but that doesn't always mean we should." Martha Rodriguez preserved every letter from her son, understanding intuitively that he was witnessing the implementation of technologies that her generation had only imagined. Her kitchen table in San Antonio became an archive of one family's experience with the long-term consequences of military innovation. Dr. Hoffman's longitudinal study of squad automatic weapons concluded with findings that troubled defense planners who had initially celebrated the M249's tactical success. Superior weapons create strategic temptation. When military intervention becomes operationally easier, political leaders face lower thresholds for choosing force over diplomacy. Her analysis reached Eugene Stoner through unofficial channels, confirming concerns that had grown heavier with each passing year. In his final interviews, he struggled to reconcile pride in his technical achievement with unease about its unintended strategic consequences. "I solved the firepower problem," he told a military journalist in 1997. "But each successful engagement reminds me that creating better weapons might perpetuate the wars that demand them. History will remember the weapon's technical brilliance, but I carry the weight of its moral complexity." The machinist's son from Indiana had indeed changed warfare itself, proving that individual innovation could reshape global military doctrine. But the legacy was complicated by the realization that tactical excellence could create strategic obligations that extended far beyond the original problem he had been asked to solve. John Stoner watched her husband's final years with the sadness of a woman who understood that brilliant men sometimes carry burdens that genius alone cannot resolve. Eugene's workshop remained active until his death in 1997. But the lightness of pure technical challenge had been replaced by the weight of consequences he had never intended to create. The M249's impact transcended mere firepower statistics. It democratized automatic weapons capability, giving every infantry squad the suppressive fire previously available only to specialized machine gun teams. Military theorists documented how traditional formations evolved around the new weapon, with saw gunners becoming the cornerstone of fire and maneuver tactics that would define 21st century combat. But the weapon's strategic legacy proved more complex than its tactical success. The reliability that Stoner had engineered into every component enabled military interventions that might have been impossible with conventional weapons. From peacekeeping in the Balkans to counterinsurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan, the M249's presence in squad inventories had fundamentally altered how America projected military power. In his final years, Stoner reflected on the paradox of his life's work during quiet evenings in Palo Alto, watching California sunsets while contemplating legacy that would outlive him by generations. He'd spent decades imagining tools of war, driven by the belief that superior weapons could protect American soldiers and potentially shorten conflicts. The M249 had indeed saved lives by providing tactical advantages that enemies struggled to counter. but it had also enabled military interventions that might not have been attempted without such reliable squad-level firepower. The weapon's technical brilliance had created strategic possibilities that no one had anticipated during its development. If this story reminded you that even in the darkest times, small acts of humanity still matter, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. Years later, veterans would still hear the weapon's distinctive cyclic rate in quiet moments, remembering the sound that had become synonymous with American military presence around the world. But in the end, it wasn't the weapon that defined Stoner's legacy. It was the relentless pursuit of perfection that drove a man to reimagine what American soldiers could accomplish when properly equipped, and the moral weight of discovering that technical solutions to military problems often create new complexities that no amount of engineering brilliance can resolve. The machinist's son from Indiana had given his country a weapon that worked exactly as intended, but success in warfare carries consequences that extend far beyond the original design parameters. Eugene Stoner's greatest creation became both his proudest achievement and his heaviest burden, a reminder that innovation in service of protection can inadvertently enable the very conflicts it was designed to resolve. How do you carry two truths that seem to contradict each other? Pride in saving lives and concern about enabling conflicts. The answer, like the weight of the M249 itself, is something each person must bear individually, remembering that even the most brilliant solutions create new questions that the next generation must answer.